thanks so much everyone for being here. Let's get started. So just a moment, let me make sure I have everything set on my end. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm the project manager for this Heinz College Capstone group. And today we'd like to demonstrate the system we created over the past semester for increasing the speed and consistency with which GreenEdge technologies can help prioritize sites for municipally owned EV chargers in Pennsylvania. So far, I've coordinated the team's efforts through project scoping with our client, timeline planning, and task management. And then besides me, we have Ricardo, our primary geospatial analyst, Beichen, our product manager, who has translated client needs to the usable product you'll see today, Zheng, our primary web tool development specialist, Anny, who put this presentation and our final report together and has contributed to our geospatial analysis as well, and Channing, our data specialist, who's incorporated landmark data and other hard to wrangle information into our solution. Next slide, please. So the agenda today will cover just a background for this project, the goals of our product that flow from the project context in the background, a description of the product, a bit of information about the data we're using, the results of our geospatial analyses, a demo of the web tool we've created, and then a brief intro into what future directions this kind of product solution might go into. Next slide, please. Background. So before we dive into our solution, I'd like to introduce our partner organization and describe what their mission is in the way they described it to me. And here it is on the screen. This is the emerging infrastructure status quo that GreenEdge tech is disrupting. And in case anyone can't see it, I'm gesturing at an image of an electric vehicle or an EV parked on the street in front of a home, presumably the owners, and the EV is charging from an unattended extension cable that's threaded somewhat clumsily through an inadequate, looks like an indoor cable runner over some of the sidewalk, not all of it. And it's otherwise exposed to the elements. It's easy to imagine how this setup might fail, maybe even dangerously, and how this would become more of a nuisance if a higher proportion of people started doing it. I've already seen this in the neighborhood I'm living in. At the very least, it's clearly an accessibility issue. It may not be safe in rainy or snowy conditions, and even in the best weather, unattended charging cables seem like they might pose a danger to different populations, like maybe children playing outside. So given these concerns, it seems likely that some alternative infrastructure arrangement will emerge to serve the needs of urban EV owners who store their car on the street overnight and would like to charge it there too. Now, local streets are typically managed by local governments. And so maybe the first types of solutions we think that will emerge to improve this status quo will be agreements between utilities and municipalities to facilitate single-family homeowners installing EV chargers in this grassy space right here, or the pavement directly adjacent to the street. So just facilitating interactions between homeowners and electrical utilities. In neighborhoods throughout Pennsylvania, though, multifamily housing and rental housing is present alongside these owner-occupied single-family houses. Thus, EV charging solutions that emerge will hopefully, we think likely, include direct investment by municipalities to provide EV chargers on their streets that both renters and homeowners can walk to. And this is where GreenEdge comes in. Next slide, please. Our partner organization, GreenEdge Technologies, is trying to disrupt the historical pattern of infrastructural amenities being rolled out inequitably. They're a Pittsburgh-based startup that aims to enhance urban communities by securing equitable access and distribution of green technologies. In practice, they offer full-service site selection and installation of EV chargers. And since their primary focus at this stage is on the growing market of EV chargers, their initial client base is the cities and boroughs in Pennsylvania, places where people commonly park overnight in the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. So up to now, I've been describing the social problem that GreenEdge is trying to address. To assist GreenEdge, our project focuses on a business problem of theirs. So for the rest of this presentation, we will be narrowly focused on this business problem, but we in GreenEdge, of course, have this larger social goal in mind. Now, the business problem that we're trying to solve with our solution is a bottleneck in GreenEdge's sales pipeline. There are over 1,000 municipalities in Pennsylvania, and selling to each one requires a lot of analytical and editorial work. Our solution aims to relieve the sales bottleneck at 2 points. One, identifying optimal EV charging sites that strike a balance in equity and demand trade-offs. And two, generating collateral like images of geospatial data or just the data itself that eventually populate these proposals, like the one you see here on the right, that GreenEdge distributes to its potential municipal customers. Currently, these processes are almost fully manual. The client selects EV charging sites using existing geospatial tools, ranging from tools created by the Census Bureau or the EPA to Google Maps, and then carefully constructs walking buffers using these tools with nearby landmarks with their own graphical program in concert with these kind of Google Maps directions queries. How far can you walk in 5 minutes, for example? Next slide, please. Before Anny introduces our attempts to streamline this process, a quick note on the equity goal pursued by GreenEdge. We're using two definitions of environmental justice, or EJ, areas as a geospatial proxy for vulnerable parties in our analysis. These definitions are from the federal and state level environmental protection agencies and resolve in an algorithmic approach as EJ scores for geographies like census blocks. The specific kind of level or chosen point along the equity demand trade-off will ultimately be set by GreenEdge and their clients in a different way in each case, perhaps. But in the example that follows, you'll see a single example of this equity demand trade-off, just for illustration purposes. So we're going to make claims that this or that place is the best site for or best area for an EV charger based on an equity demand trade-off, but that's just one example of the type of trade-off you can make. Every client's going to want to take a different approach to that. Next slide, please. Contrast this EJ consideration with what we know about the typical EV user today. The typical EV owner is more likely than not to be older than 55 and be in a household making more than $150,000 annually. About 75% of full EV buyers today are men. Over 85% of them are white. This project is building toward a future where EV ownership is more reflective of the general driving population. And now I'll hand it off to Anny to introduce how our tool, is trying to help the client.
Thank you, Jack. So I'm going to briefly discuss our product goals. So as Jack mentioned, there are one objective of GreenEdge technologies is to identify EJ areas, but they also need to balance this with identifying EV demand. In addition, they would like a product where the user can select a 5-minute walking radius that takes into account street lines and elevation from the potential site. The product should also have color-coded maps that reflect desired features and variables, and ideally also export images for reports. So now I'm going to describe our product, which Beichen later in this presentation is going to demo for you. So this is going to be a web-based user interface specifically built on ArcGIS Web App Builder Developer Edition. Within this tool, which is browser-based, the user will be able to select layers that are color-coded to reflect different features. It will also display landmarks of interest or places where people congregate. And it will also have custom indices that reflect their goals. Within that web browser tool, they will be able to select a site. And after selecting a site, they can generate a 5-minute walking buffer from that site to see what landmarks or other features are within that 5-minute walking buffer. So the buffer will display landmark count and different metrics that are of interest to the client. So I'm going to briefly talk about the data that we use to generate this product. So our data exists in 3 categories. The first is data from the Environmental Protection Agency, specifically a tool they have on their website called EJ Screen. This tool displays EJ areas according to the EPA definition. So it contains some demographic data at the block group level, as well as some environmental hazard data that Jack talked about, mostly air quality, but cancer risk as well, all at the block group level. We had to supplement some of that demographic information, specifically vehicle and income information from the census, also at the block group level. And then there's a third category of diverse sources that we collectively called landmarks. And these are latitude, longitude points of areas of interest. And now I'm going to hand it over to Channing. He's going to discuss these landmark icons that you will see in the demo.
Thank you, Annie. So we consider that landmarks where drivers can park for a relatively long period of time provide an excellent operating environment for nearby EV chargers. It can take as little as 8 hours for a typical Tesla Model Y long range to charge using a level 2 EV charger, not to mention level 1. So we can assume that an EV needs to charge for at least 1 to 2 hours before we can see a significant change in battery level. So landmarks that could attract drivers to park for an extended period typically include stadiums, schools, libraries, recreational facilities, and hospitals. We have collected and organized all such location data across Pennsylvania. Other than that, we have also included the locations of top grocery chains because we believe that areas with medium to large grocery chains are likely to have a relatively high density of population and longer parking times for car owners. So by combining all these landmarks, we have embedded those little circular icons that you can see on the screen on our web app. So after users select a point on the interface, they can observe the number of icons to determine the potential user volume around that point. We have collected about 120,000 of these landmarks across Pennsylvania to provide our client with the best possible measurement of driver volumes. It is worth noting that we have not included any restaurant information because restaurants are highly dynamic properties that can close after a short period of business operation, and their address stability cannot be guaranteed. So these data will expire shortly. On the other hand, many restaurants today are fast food restaurants. Car owners visit these places to save time, not to wait for 2 hours and fully charge their vehicles. So considering these factors, we have decided not to introduce restaurants as a landmark in our map. And as you can see, we have already placed the landmark icons on the screen due to version changes. The colors of landmark icons on the screen may differ from what you see in our web app, but you can always determine the purpose of these landmarks by their shapes. And that's it from me about the landmark data. I hand it back to Annie.
Thank you, Channing. So now I'm going to talk about our geospatial results, or GIS results. It's worth noting that all of this data is processed in GIS before being loaded into the web tool. And we're going to look and introduce some of the chloropep maps that you will see in the tool. So there are many variables included in the geodatabase that made these maps. There are 12 environmental hazards collected from the EPA. There's race, poverty status, income, vehicle access in the household, renter versus owner status, and then many different landmarks that Channing introduced, including parks, grocery stores. So one thing that I just want to take a note before showing you the maps is to explain some of the goals with the custom indices we've made. So as you saw on the slide before, there are many variables included in the data set, and also there are many variables that are related to the goals of Greenwich Tech. Looking at each variable individually would be very time consuming and overwhelming, and potentially also confusing. So one of our goals was to create layers that have different weights and custom indices that incorporate multiple variables that are of interest to the client. So one of them that we created was called an environmental equity score. And as the name suggests, this is similar to an EJ area, but more customized. And this is an example of an environmental equity score. Now, we know that there is really no perfect way to weigh this, but this is just an example that we came up with. And in this equity score, 34% of the score comes from the non-white population in the area, in the block group. So just to clarify, non-white is considered any person who within the census reports race or ethnicity box that's other than white. So this also includes people who report multiple races, including white. 33% PM 2.5, which is a environmental hazard, and 33% of the weight is the population income between 75K and 125K. And this income is below the average income of an EV user, but that income bracket, we consider a medium income bracket of people that could potentially in the future own an EV if they had more access to chargers. Now, we also have an EV demand layer. So this is reflective more of the current population that could have an EV charger and could benefit from one of the sites installed by Greenwich Tech. So this score is based off of 25% weight of the population in the block group that have 2 or more vehicles, 25% over 125K household income, 25% is renting status. So people that are renters are more likely to need a curbside charger. And then another 25% is the population density. So we're going to use Wilkinsburg as an example for the rest of our presentation and in our demo. And that's because Wilkinsburg is considered by both the DEP and the EPA as an environmental justice area. You can see on the left that the environmental equity score is fairly dark. So darker colors mean higher scores here. And most of Wilkinsburg is in that highest color area. And then when you look at the demand on the right-hand side, you see some areas in the middle and southern western part of Wilkinsburg that could have more demand, potentially because of renter status or vehicle status. So one thing that we wanted to consider is, in addition to having these separate scores, would be to combine this into a overall suitability score for Greenwich Tech. So this is an example of a block group suitability layer. So this takes into account many different variables and are with custom weights. So in this map, the suitability score for a block group is based off of the non-white population, the amount of renters, the amount of people that have 2 or more vehicles in their household, population density, PM 2.5 exposure. And then instead of an income group, what we are calculating here is the variation between neighboring income groups in the block group. So the variation between that block group in low income, mid income, and high income to its neighbors. And the goal here is that with the higher scores, you should be able to see areas that not only have the target population that we are considering, but also have some variation in income status in their neighborhood. And you can see this is the Wilkinsburg area with this suitability score. And then we have another suitability score layer where the weights are slightly different, and there's higher weights to this income related variable. And this will highlight neighborhoods where you have a lot of differing income brackets. So now I'm going to hand it off to Beichen, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. He's going to demo our web tool.
Thanks, Anny. I'll just share my screen and let's do.
Give me a second. It's being slow. Oh, there we go.
Okay. You guys can see my screen, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is like our final product. So how to use it is very easy. You just will give the clients a link, and because the whole product is already deployed on a cloud platform, so you just have to open the link in your browser, and it's here. So as you can see, it's a map, and we're currently looking at the Pittsburgh area, and there's different functions and buttons on the map. Like you can zoom out and zoom in, and you can check all the legends we mentioned before by clicking this little legend right at the bottom. And you can see there are stores and schools, as we mentioned before, and also there are some parks. And you can also check what is currently showing on the map by clicking this layer list. And you can select and unselect all those like grocery stores and place of worship. You can make them disappear from the map. And also, besides all these little icons, you can also select different layers we mentioned before. We have two main themes of the final score currently, as Anny said. So currently I'm showing this final score 2 extreme income, which gives higher weights to the income related variables. Of course, you can expand this and you can see darker color means higher score. So you can change and select this and change to another theme, which is this one. You can see there's some changes on the map, but still darker means higher score. And also there are other layers we mentioned before, like the demand layer, like the EES score layer. You can just check whichever you like, but mainly we suggest to use this final score. So we can also navigate to whichever place you want by typing the place you want to go. Right here. Let's just take a look at Wilkinsburg, as we mentioned before. So, okay, we're here. It's the Wilkinsburg we're looking at. So let's just zoom in a little bit. So this central area is where we want to focus to look at because it's pretty dark, which means it has higher score. And you can see there are a bunch of places of worships and grocery stores. So let's just take a look at our different widgets we built. There's one called the ISO 4, which can give you 5 minutes walking buffer around the point that you select on the map. So after you open this function, you can just change this to ISO Chrome, and it will allow you to, just choose a 5 minutes, and you should change the travel type to pedestrian, which means you are walking, and maybe the start point approximation to 15 meters. And after this, you can just click on the map wherever you want. Like let's just say this place. Yeah, it's a pretty good place to me because it's centered in the dark area, and also the 5 minutes walking buffer include a lot of public facilities. So after this, you can just maybe select this point as a great location, and after that, you may want to check the data around this area, like all this block group around this covered area. You can just click the button that next to the SO4. It will just give you a function to download the data. You can click this draw and select the draw mode, maybe just the first one, which is the same as point a place on the map. And you can just, let's just say 400 meters, which is a typical 5 minutes walking buffer. It will just create a similar distance around this place, so which you can download the data within this buffer, and you can just click report, and there is a download button here, download CSV files. You can see there are a bunch of files downloaded on my computer. There are all the layers on the map that only including the block groups within the buffer. Okay, so that's basically the tool, and yeah, we can talk more about this after the presentation. Thank you. I'll just hand over back to Anny.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share a demo version of the tool that Beichen just shared too. The demo version might not function perfectly because there are some usage limits on the ISO 4 app that wouldn't be an issue for the client, but might be an issue if let's say we have hundreds or thousands of users. That was kind of the intention. So here it is. This will only be accessible until we transfer the tool to the client later this week. Yep, there it is. So you can play with that a little bit. So in the meantime, I'm going to kind of just close this out. So I want to give everyone a sense of how GreenEdge can build on what we've built over this semester. And we think of this work as fitting into two general categories. First, for a community to select a weighted layer based on the priorities of their constituents, it would help probably to first ask the constituents what their priorities are. So in David's words, in GreenEdge's words, a boots on the ground surveying process will help GreenEdge establish their credibility on their clients' terms when suggesting a specific prioritization scheme and the suitability scores that go along with that. So thoughtful client feedback collection is a sort of prerequisite to getting the most out of the tool we've built. Second, beyond using the web tool, we've handed off now or we will soon hand off the technical assets we've developed. And with those, the client has the opportunity to grow these tools with more detailed or relevant landmark and demographic data collection or use that client municipalities may be able to share. Perhaps a local municipality has better fine-grained data about its locality than we had access to, kind of using basically only data available to state level. So next slide, please. We'd like to thank our professor, Edson Severnini, our advisor, for guidance on this project and for great feedback on this presentation, as well as everyone who provided feedback during our midpoint presentation. And we thank everyone here for listening. I'm going to open it up for questions now, and I'll first start with a question asked by Jay Kunzler in the chat. Thanks, Jay. Initial J, I'm sorry. So for the next 5 years, how will EV chargers benefit disadvantaged populations? Are they expected to buy new EV cars soon? That's a really good question. Kind of in the time between when this hit the chat and now, I pulled up a few quick stats. According to JD Power, about 3% of new car sales are full EV. Maybe 5% are a combination of EV and like plug-in hybrid, versus 1% of cars on the road. So new cars are more electric than older cars. The average age of a car on the road is 12 years, but the average age of an electric car on the road is only 3.5 years. So we think that just by the way the used car cycle goes, I've never bought a new car, only used, that eventually it will stabilize with a higher proportion of electric vehicles, and electric vehicles will become a higher proportion of new cars sold. So eventually we think electric vehicles will just be mainstream in the way internal combustion engine vehicles are now. And this is kind of building toward that future. Kim Lucas in the chat asks, are the locations identified prioritized? As in, if you had to grow a network incrementally, here's where to go first, second, third. And is there a way to toggle where EV car shared cars versus privately owned vehicles should go? So our analysis does not consider sort of like a prioritization network, like how that might shift, because there is not really an accessible data source that we could find that was really credible for where are all the chargers in a state. Perhaps a municipality would have better information about where the publicly accessible electric vehicle chargers are, and that would be a useful input to the prioritization scheme, and why we're really excited to hand off the technical aspects of our solution, as well as that sort of web tool that makes all of that stuff easy to use. And then EV car shared cars versus privately owned vehicles. We were, I think, implicitly considering just privately owned vehicles, but EV car shared cars is an interesting extension that I think this sort of tool could perhaps address. Anyone on my team have any thoughts about either of those before I open up further?
Sure. About the first question, I think you addressed almost all of it. I would just add that, like taking into consideration this factors into where to locate charging stations. Also, I think it's important to try to avoid creating infrastructure kind of deserts if there's such a concept, especially because, as you mentioned, like in the near future, there are some analysts who are saying that probably prices of cars will end up converging, like electric vehicles and all other technologies. So this may help us to prepare for the future and avoid having like infrastructure deserts.
My also like final thought on that is that in the short term, getting more business and traffic into these areas of people that may be spending money near the charging station is also just a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can answer the latest question, like the limitations of the grid. We do not consider, we did not consider the grid, like the pressures on the electric grid, because that's kind of too complex, because first we need to get the data, and then we need to use some specific models to, evaluate to predict the pressure that this EV charger stations will have on the grid networks. So we did not consider this, but that's absolutely a very important question. So I think what we can offer is just a map that you can select candidates of the locations from the map. And after you select some candidates, you still need to, take a detailed look on the place of, grid pressure and, other places around this. If it's actually doable to build up EV charger place here, just to a reference for the candidates instead of a very detailed plan for the place.
Mm-hmm. Beichen is absolutely right. I'd add Pennsylvania is a particularly hard case for including this grid data because it was so early to electricity development. I was talking with another student in this Heinz program who works for Duquesne Light, who is the main electrical utility for the Pittsburgh region. And they are proud of being the world's, they claim this, I haven't verified this, but claim to be the world's first electricity utility. And that's, a very interesting part of Pittsburgh's industrial legacy, the Westinghouse Corporation and all that. But it also means, in a practical sense, when I asked, could we get data about what the grid capacity is at a certain location, like intersection, let's say, I heard from him, you know what, oftentimes we don't really have a good idea about that until we dig. These lines are so old. The transmission infrastructure is kind of such a historically layered thing. And that's why we went with the resolution in our map of census blocks instead of something like a 25-meter raster or a 50-meter raster. We knew we couldn't be that specific because of this data limitation. Question from Stan Caldwell. Did you consider that many people parking at landmarks may not live in the neighborhood and that might skew your data? I just say yes, we did, but I'd throw it maybe to Channing, who is our kind of chief like landmark person, maybe Beichen as well. You'd have some to throw in.
Yeah, so people don't necessarily have to live nearby any of these landmarks, but we have over 120,000 landmarks in Pennsylvania. So basically it covers all the Pennsylvania area. And then we aim to use those landmarks to let people park for 1 or 2 hours to let them see significant change in the battery level instead of, they park there every day for their daily EV charging. So that's our purpose for that.
Yeah, I just want to say so I think maybe Stan's this question comes from we consider the areas that are around the location, the demographic, variables, and we also consider the public facilities. Actually, I agree that it actually consider two different kinds of people. The first one is who live around, and they may, park their car in the EV charger station overnight, maybe to charge their car. Another kind of person is who come by day and for those public facilities like the churches, like the stores. And when they are there, they just park their car in the EV charger station. So actually, these are a good demand. So we consider all of them. So this is pretty, good for all kinds of people that are here. So
just to clarify, the question is whether the demographic data considered in the layers were taking into account potential clientele from other areas that come to the places where there is these landmarks and just stay for a couple of hours.
So I can answer that. There is no radius of calculation taking into the score of the only one is adjacent block groups for variance in income that and I think Jack and Beichen can talk a little bit more on how they calculated this, but in that regard for the suitability layer, there are neighborhood block groups that are considered. But ultimately still, visually, the user is expected to look at a neighborhood or area the way that David normally approaches this. And we do expect that, for example, with the Wilkinsburg example, we had discussions about people in Edgewood, would they drive over to Wilkinsburg to charge their car? And we believe so. So within reason, we do expect that actually one of the benefits of targeting these specific demographics is that we can bring more dollars to their high traffic areas. But specifically, only the suitability score takes in account neighborhood block groups.
Yeah, and then to address maybe the specific, very limited question, is there data in our tool that represents the demographics of visitors to these landmarks? No, there's not. But for the reasons I think my teammates covered well, hopefully our tool is useful despite that.
Yeah, I think you addressed that well. I would just make sure that you articulate that in your report, that that these are all taken into consideration, and provide the responses that your team just articulated in here, that we do take these things into consideration, and they can be, we do understand at times there might be conflict, but oftentimes they're beneficial. Again, to the Wilkinsburg example, there may be a lot of wealthy people in, say Westmoreland County, who in Murraysville, who are driving to the Wilkinsburg, and will commute and park in Wilkinsburg, and then take the East Busway into downtown Pittsburgh. So they kind of drive from home, charge their EVs on the street while they're kind of working downtown or in the East End, during the day, and then they come back, their car's all charged, and then they drive back home. Now, again, that's not, and they may have a car charger at home too, so again, there's just, lots of different scenarios. Same thing with the, if you're looking at this, the PPG Paints Arena that's in the Hill District neighborhood. You have a lot of people coming in for sporting events from the outside, but and that can be fine because during the the evenings when people are there, they're charging and getting revenue for the for the EV chargers, but then the locals can use it later at night when everyone's gone. But I think just kind of explaining that you recognize the fluidity of all the different people coming in and out, just recognize that in your report is fine.
That's great insight. Thank you. Yeah, reminds me of Jane Jacobs' mixture of primary uses. Good point. Thanks.
May I just add one thing about that? Thank you, Stan. I think it's all about the goal. So I guess the way Green Edge was thinking, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, is to potentially have the municipality make the investment. So I think they were kind of looking at the local constituents. That's why they were focusing more on the demographics of the location. But you're totally right that the revenue could come from people who are actually not in those municipalities.
As a representative of a municipality on this call, Kim Lucas with the City of Pittsburgh's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, this is really, really exciting. I'm going to definitely share this tool with my folks. I'm sure you guys know, and this is why you're working on it, but there's this wave of federal infrastructure funding that has hit the map, and the application for EV funding is due at the end of the month. And so we are working with Duquesne Light, and I'll be making some calls to CMU to see how you guys might want to partner with the city, because there's so much potential here. And one of the places that we aren't totally prepared yet is this planning side. We have a vision of what we think would look great, and we have some work that's been done for off-street charging, but not nearly enough has been done for the on-street charging within the right of way. So this is definitely going to be a really good foundation for some of those internal conversations. I obviously am registered for this webinar and your recording, so I'm hoping you guys will be sending out this recording shortly after it's done so that I can share it with my team. And thank you.
Absolutely, we will be sharing this recording. Thanks so much, Kim.
David, if you want to share some thoughts, please go ahead. I cannot hear David. Can anybody hear David?
Sorry, yeah, I can't hear you, David.
Yeah, maybe he's reconnecting.
Yeah, I think that last hand motion he made was him trying to say that he's gonna hop back in. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. I see Stan has a hand up. Go ahead while I'm rebooting myself here.
Thank you. I just one more question. I actually just posted an article on our blog yesterday about the issue of etiquette issues of EV charging at hotels. And this is the issue of kind of shared charging, and if you're going to be charging at night, and having one person be there for 12 hours instead of just using it for the 2 hours that you need it. So something to consider, and you may have a paragraph on this in your report already, but the inherent conflict between parking spaces and EV charging spaces. And so how to manage, if the municipality is going to be putting this in, how to manage that the EV space is being used for actual EV charging as much as possible and not just non-EV charging. They actually came up with a new term for this called icing, is for internal combustion engine people parking in EV charging spots. So it's just now it's a good sign that this is actually now becoming an issue in kind of public charging areas, but it is becoming an issue. And have you looked at it? And if not, you might just want to put a paragraph in your report.
That's a great question. We haven't spoken about these metering issues. I think that would be up to the discretion of each municipality. If I could venture a guess as to how they would think about it, though, I'm from Chicago. Everyone pays basically hourly for parking. Or so that's sold our parking meters actually to private financial consortium a couple decades ago now. It's an interesting issue, but I think the intuitive case for just charging, just metering spaces where you're also fueling is easier to make. But ultimately, I think that would be up to the discretion of the municipality who would own that infrastructure. But yes, it's a definitely interesting and first order issue for making this useful to people.
Yeah, and it may not be even just metered parking. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this now. We just did a student capstone on this last year with the loading zones and the smart loading zones. And of course, the city of Pittsburgh here is doing a demo smart loading zone. Philadelphia is doing one. So, as cities are going through a very big process of redefining curbs and how we define how they manage curbs, I think this is a very important component of that whole new discussion as well. And your data could be very important to municipalities as they not just grapple with the potential conflicts with this, but to, Green Edge's mission of how do you get the best revenue from it too.
David, this sounds like a great project idea for the next Heinz Capstone team.
Well, yeah. There's definitely a lot here that I've kind of wanted to unpack a little bit. Even from the beginning, one of the questions I think Stan had brought it up as well as, some of the other factors that might be coming into play here with visitors to the area to certain sites. A lot of the data that you guys are working on is based on a 5-minute walking criteria where, if somebody is coming in to visit a specific state or, location, they're going to be within a reasonable walking distance to get their car charged. But I think a lot of it also comes back to we're working off of, the concept that 80% of EV owners charge at home. So, take out the equation that people are kind of commuting into the area to visit sites, but a lot of this is a public infrastructure that's set up to be 24/7 public access, with the primary thought that, we need to get these chargers to the homes and to the residents so that we can help. And this also goes into first initial J questions regarding, adoption for disadvantaged people or communities. If we're taking into account a lot of these factors that the team is taking into account, we could, in essence, see these adoption rates increase by merely listening to the communities and listening to all of the community, the disadvantaged as well as those that, just don't have the access and to this type of technology. So I think there was a couple things there that I kind of wanted to unpack a little bit as we go into some of the future developments for this type of program. Some of our thoughts are with, within the software. Okay, so how are we working reservation systems? Not just, I'm going to be here for 2 hours, but I'm going to need this spot from 9 to 11 a.m. tomorrow to charge, and to be able to start to reserve spots for yourself in the software. But with that, we also need to have monitoring of the site. Some of the charging equipment in the future is going to come camera ready so that they can do more active monitoring of the site itself to see if there's an obstruction of any sort or someone that is idling or lingering, or icing, so that we can kind of see that. And then the municipality can say, hey, we've got someone we got to tow. Maybe it's on our responsibility. A lot of that comes into the contract and to the discussions that we have with the municipality of how do we handle someone that might be icing, but part of that also comes into how are we monitoring the location itself. So these are conversations that we would love to have with Carnegie Mellon, Heinz School, on how do we work in different types of camera systems and work within the regulations that are in place for something like that. So all great questions. Thank you. That's all I have.
David's been so helpful, meeting with us every week, trying to just iterating through like our product look like this, our solution could look like that, and just guiding us in terms of like what is actually just useful in making our business process like bigger. How can we do more of this? Really keeping us kind of moving in the right direction. Thank you, David. Thank you, Green Edge.
Yeah, I think a lot of this too is like, what are and having you guys some great advisors on this team, by the way, because the questions that come out I think are very insightful to not just what you guys are doing now, but how can we keep this moving, because there's so much to do. There's questions we don't even know yet that that are going to happen as the technology proliferates, as adoption increases, and it's increasing faster than we imagined and predicted that it would increase. So how are we thinking about the future adaptations that will be necessary for these types of projects? And I think working with your team has kept us kind of trying to stay ahead of what those questions will be in the coming years. And I've really enjoyed working with you guys, and would love to continue efforts to see how we can make this even better, or work on some other accoutrements, some other additions to this type of system. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? Going once, twice. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for kind of hearing about our project, about the product we developed on top of it, about the work that went into it. It's taken kind of all of the collective thought leadership in this room and sort of distributed from sources on the internet to kind of help us really hone this project into what you saw today. So thank you so much on behalf of my team. Really great questions today too. And I'll follow up shortly with a recording of this presentation to everyone who is here today, and probably many that weren't also. Just hit everyone up with an email on Tuesday morning. All right. David?
I'm going to say one last thing, because I don't think I stressed it enough. You guys as a team were fantastic. I mean, you were very attentive. You were also very thoughtful to ask me great questions, on what does this mean? How does this mean moving forward? and very insightful. And I was very honored and pleased to be a part of this group. You guys, I wish you all the best in moving forward in your careers. It was an honor working with you guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
All right.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I think we'll leave it there. All right. Goodbye.